So I'll just kind of run through the presentation, and then we could answer any questions. But just to level set, we're Collin College and the APICS North Texas Chapter, or ASCM, we're partnering to launch a CPIM 1 class in 2 weeks. And this is we haven't done this in a while, so it's a new class, and we're really trying to get more opportunities around teaching our certifications to local students. So it's something that's new and we're excited about. And this is kind of the format that we're going to go through today. I just have a picture of Chris and myself. We'll give you a quick background. I know Chris has a good experience. He's got a CPIM, and I think it's great to hear from others who have the certification and the value add. And then through this presentation, honestly, feel free to stop me, and we'll try to monitor the chat box if there's any questions that come up. But again, we could make this as interactive as we want to. But my goal today is to kind of go through the premise, overview of APICS ACM, overview of the certifications with the main focus on the CPIM, and then what's the return on investment, and then take Q&A. But really, we can do Q&A throughout each of the sessions. So just to give a really quick background on myself, and then Chris can introduce himself as well. And so my name is Vince Mosick. I'm the VP of Education for the North Texas Chapter. We have over 800 members locally, and we're in the top 25 largest chapters in the country with APICS. So I teach the certifications, and I currently work at Boeing Global Services. A lot of supply chain experience, and I'm a advocate of these certifications because they really helped me in my career. And Chris, would you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, Vince. Your slide makes me feel really old when I see 29 years of supply chain experience there, but I guess it's accurate. So for everybody on the call, just by no specific design, just by circumstances, I've worked for some really big companies: United Parcel Service, PepsiCo, Aramark, Delco Remy, Bosch, Rolls-Royce, Oceaneering, Cobham, and now I work with Vince at Boeing. And just a quick summary, or just to wrap it up into one tight ball. The reason that I'm on the call is just to try to help articulate how I've got 30 years of supply chain experience, and for many years of that I was not certified, and I was looking for knowledge. I was looking for a baseline of information to help me understand why I was doing what I was doing. And then in the early 2000s, I found APICS, and through a long road of starts and fails and restarts, I finally became certified with my CPIM, and it finally answered a lot of questions as to why I was doing what I was doing and how to do it best, using the best practices. So hopefully you all can understand the value of that and realize the benefit that APICS certification can provide you.
Great, thanks Chris. So I'll probably be doing most of the discussion around the slides, and then Chris, feel free to jump in as you will and add anything you like. Would be really good. So that's kind of how we'll approach this. But I always like to start with the premise. We think about after college, Harvard Business Review put something out that there's a lot of, it's really hard to get continued learning. A lot of companies, they have programs and everything, but it's all about, once we know what function we want to work into and whatever our field wants to be, it's all about how do we continuously learn. And it really makes the job a lot more fun. But what this was interesting is, for employees who lack supervision, support, and career development, only 15% say their employees providing them with opportunities to develop their technical skills that they will need in the future, right? So we think about the situation now, and there's a lot of challenges in the industry, but it's all about how do we keep ourselves on the cutting edge of some practices. And CPIM has been around for a great number of years. It started in the mid-1970s. And the thing that's exciting is no matter how much technology changes and things get automated, there's so much need for understanding the fundamentals and kind of like the domain expert knowledge of what CPIM is. And that's kind of what Chris was alluding to as well. So it's always good to think about, I want to be in the driver's seat of my career. And kind of want to just give a level set about ASCM and APICS. So APICS is under the pillar of learning and development, and there's a parent company that came out a few years ago called ASCM, and the reason is they wanted to branch out to just not do learning and not just do workforce development, but do corporate transformation and making an impact. Because we think about supply chains, there's a lot of like food shortages and things that could be resolved through better supply chain practices. So there's a big movement on ASCM. It's the gold standard for supply chain certification. There's a lot more other organizations out there right now, but ASCM is the oldest, and they still have a lot of respect and attention globally. And we see that when we look at the job requirements for, supply chain type roles. So, you could already be deep in supply chain or just thinking about this as a career opportunity, but, thinking about APICS, ASCM, workforce development, and then performance organizations, people and processes, and really diving into, okay, what the CPIM is and what are some of the other certifications are and how are they different. So CPIM started in the mid 1970s. We'll go through some detail of what that means, what it is. And then there's also some other ones that are out there, the CSCP and the CLTD. And there's also SCORE and principles. So as we think about supply chains get a lot more complicated, even though technology gets more automated, there's a definite need for customized certifications that help that piece of the supply chain. And, one example that I really like to use is when you think about like common products, there's a lot more variety now. So we talk of, I always like to bring up like toothpaste or any kind of product. There's a lot more options now, which makes the supply chain a little more complex for these companies to meet the special needs of the more high maintenance consumer than previous years. So we'll, just a backdrop on the certifications, but this is my favorite slide when we think about what the CPIM really is, right? And the way APICS thinks about supply chains is it's all about plan, source, make, deliver, return, and enable. And, those are the different functions, right? So make is the manufacturing side, but CPIM really gets into planning and sourcing. So demand planning and then sourcing from a purchasing perspective, because all these companies are buying product. They have business to business relationships, and then deliver, return, and enable is CLTD. So as you can see, the certifications at the bottom, that's kind of their depth of how much they get into. So CPIM really focuses on planning, sourcing, and making. And the SCORE framework is getting a lot of attention from the industry. So at Boeing currently, we're structuring our org design around SCORE. I know Ericsson has really embraced the SCORE methodology, but it goes back to the premise of, hey, supply chains are getting a lot more complex, and companies really, how do we simplify the complex and make sure that we can have the right, functional alignment, and organization can really focus on what their, responsibilities are there. So just a little overview of that. And then some of the common roles that the CPIM really fits into, we talk about plan, source, and make, are kind of listed here. So demand planning, master planning, master scheduler, production planning. And what's interesting is, Chris and I met at Boeing Global Services, and I think we started to work on, I knew when I first met Chris, I knew he had a CPIM, and then over time we naturally started working on some projects together. And it's really interesting because we sing to the same sheet of music when it comes to finding challenge, ways, opportunities of improvement, things like that. So it's really good that people that have CPIM, they can really collaborate closer with others that do as well, to kind of look at what are some of the best practices and how we can look at fixing some processes. But these are common jobs that are out there. I don't have to say this, but there's a lot of demand growth in supply chain. The silver lining with the pandemic is it's getting a lot more attention. Companies really need help in supply chain, and this is one way to help you become an expert in that area. And again, if there's any questions or, feel free to interrupt me. We have a small group, so don't be bashful. So when we think about the CPIM, it's actually 2 exams. So part 1 is the basics of supply chain. So that's the class we're going to be teaching in 2 weeks. So coming at it from if you're new to supply chain, it's a great opportunity to do part 1. So it really is the basics, and we'll go through what is the body of knowledge of that. And then after that, there's another exam to be fully certified. The exams are all multiple choice. You take them at Pearson VUE testing centers. They're very there's ones that are really close to probably where you live. There's many in DFW. The exam, you have 3.5 hours to take the exam, so you have more than enough time, and you have to take 2 exams to become fully certified. And the CSCP is one exam, and then it has, same number of questions, and the CLTD, same number of questions, same time, but they kind of focus on different aspects of supply chain. CSCP came out around 2006, and then CLTD is only about, I would say about 4 years old or so, in regards to, logistics, transportation, and distribution, because now there's so many, going back to the challenge of, hey, there's so much more product variety. There's a lot more distribution centers to make sure that, all these, dynamic needs that the customers have can be met through companies there. So that's kind of, there's no college degree required for the CPIM. So that's good. And then CSCP, there's some requirements that are kind of noted over here. But we'll dive deeper into CPIM 1, but that's just a little bit of an overview. And if we think about, CPIM 1, what really could it help you with? It can increase your knowledge of production and inventory management. A lot of the times when companies go bankrupt, it's probably because they're in some challenging business industries, but another big reason is, cash flow management, and inventory has a significant area of importance for that. So companies that can manage their inventory can kind of become very demand driven. Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, said it best that you have to treat inventory like dairy, because it could, if you don't, if you buy product and don't move it, it could have a problem with your cash flows, right? But really, maximize return on investment in the system and technologies, master the tools to effectively improve internal operations. So in supply chain, you can't hide from continuous improvement projects, and there's going to be many. Those that might already know that are going to get into the field. But really, you gain knowledge of ERP software, so enterprise resource planning systems that all these big companies have, to really advance their supply chains and their overall enterprise. But it's broken down basics of supply chain, and then there's the different modules are, strategic management of resource, master planning, detailed scheduling, and execution and control. So back when Chris and I took this exam, we actually had to take 5 different exams. CPIM had 5 different exams, and it was just these all added together. And then they realized they wanted a condensed version, because what was happening is a lot of the students were kind of getting halfway through and then not finishing. So to be really open, part 2 is a lot more difficult than part 1. It's a lot more broader, but part 1 can give you a good flavor of what's needed. And like I said, these certifications are well recognized across industries. They really do have a lot of respect. And Chris and I can share some of our feedback on how it's helped us in our career besides just having this. But with the CPIM, so if you were to enroll in the Collins College class, you would get access to our online learning material. So you get a lot of on-demand, a lot of practice questions. You'll get a slide book. And then there's also at the bottom here, you'll see that it's just all these tools that you can really use at your fingertips. And then we'll, on behalf of the board of North Texas, we'll have some teachers that come in and do training in regards to what do you need to know to pass the exam. And we're actually doing classes right now. So on Saturday, we're doing via Zoom. And the feedback has been really good with that, even though it's a lot more difficult to collaborate when we're doing things remote. But, you're getting more, when you buy the package, you're getting more than just the instructor hours. You're getting the full suite of material to really make you successful. So this is, if we think about, okay, what is the CPIM on one page? There's, introduction to supply chain, what really that is, manufacturing design, quality and continuous improvement, lean. So if you have, those that have industry experience, some of these might be common for you. And then the purchasing aspect. So they're all around planning and sourcing and making. And then capacity, which is a big area of importance, right? So we think about finite resources and things like that. But really it gets into this, if we look at the top right, this kind of illustration of sales and operations planning, master production schedules, and MRP. All supply chain companies really have this type of functionality in place. And after finishing the CPIM, you'll really have awareness of what are the inputs and the outputs, what are the potential constraints and challenges around what is needed, what is the engine behind companies within their supply chain. So the exam is broken down, business-wide concepts, demand management, transformation of demand into supply, so the production activity, and then supply. And again, feel free to pause if there's any questions, but that's really what the CPIM is. So if you look at these sections, they're pretty broad, right? again, all different industries. I'm a big believer. I come from manufacturing, and I work in the services industry now, and you can really apply the practices in manufacturing to services. So when you think about capacity and things like that, there's always going to be finite resources. So how do you make smart decisions to really meet the customer's needs? And the CPIM too is, gets into these other areas of strategic management of resources, detailed scheduling and planning, and master planning and execution and control. So it's all these other areas of aspects. So it's a lot of, focus on inventory and scheduling, and how do we, collaborate with the production team to really get towards robust solutions that are demand driven. Because, the lineage behind CPIM is rather interesting. So, it started in Ohio, and it started from a group of engineers in Ohio who essentially realized that they have some manufacturing challenges, and they found a way to do scheduling that is a systematic way. And then that's what really prompted the CPIM. And a lot of times when companies have production challenges, they're usually not applying the CPIM. There's a whole, obviously the make piece is totally different, but getting towards the production control elements, the CPIM can really help with that. And what's going on, if you think about, where supply chain is today, there's a lot of companies that are looking at bringing some of the manufacturing back domestically. I know it's going to take a lot of time before that actually happens, but just know that, right now, obviously manufacturing is not as common in the United States as it was. But again, thinking about, you can always do manufacturing practices that apply to services industry. And then on the CSCP, there's some aspects, which is end-to-end supply chain. So we talk about design, planning, and execution, and then improvement and best practices. So this is kind of what the breadth of the CSCP is. And we don't have it. We've discussed potential holding this class at Collin College, but there's nothing on the schedule right now. But that just kind of gives you an overview of what the CSCP is. And this exam is I wouldn't say it's probably equivalent from a difficulty perspective, but it's a lot more broader. And what I like about the CPIM is you get kind of you get a flavor of it when you take the basics. Was there a question I might have interrupted?
No, I just wanted to know, is there any kind of range for maybe in the future if this is possible to offer it?
Yeah, of course there is. Of course there is. And we've it could be something in the 2021 plans. And then our local chapter offers probably 2 or 3 of these classes a year as well. But it's definitely high potential of us doing that.
Okay.
Go ahead. Is there another question? Well, I'll keep going and see how we're doing on time here. 6:22, and then SCORE is another certification that's being offered, and this is really tailored towards executive level. That's metric focused, and it's all about plan, source, and make and deliver. But this training is a 3-day workshop. It's one exam. It's only 50 questions, and this is all about, when you think about companies' business models, how do they make sure their operation model is connected to their business model, which seems obvious, but it's not always. Sometimes there's some challenges that exist. And then it's all about getting companies or individuals, professionals to think about, I don't want to worry just about my customers' pain points. I want to worry about my customers' pain points. So there's different categories when you get towards plan, source, make, deliver, and then there's different activities about really coming up with an approach to fixing supply chain. So this sits above Six Sigma for those that know about, lean activities and that. It's all about, let's make sure we're focused on the right projects. And then there's a SCORE app on the phone, which is really referenced. So, supply chains metrics focus, and this can help in that aspect. There's also an APICS dictionary metric or APICS dictionary phone app. That's a really good reference as well as you start or continue your supply chain journey here. And then CLTD is the new certification. And again, this is a lot more focused on, 3PL and logistics. So it's network design, sustainability and reverse logistics, capacity planning. So we see a lot of themes that are carry over, but they're really tailored in different aspects of the supply chain. But make no mistake about it. One who passes this exam, it's definitely not easy. You'll build a level of confidence, and it'll actually make work. I know it did for myself. It made work a lot more interesting because you always want to have the gold standard, and how do you, no company is going to be perfect, but how do you help influence and fix processes to get towards that gold standard? So we're actually offering the CLTD in October at our through our chapter. So that's another option as well if you're looking to get more focused on this aspect. But now we move towards ROI, right? Return on investment. This is from 2020. It shows that if you have a certification, regardless of your industry, you're going to make more generally in supply chain. So most students don't come out of college making 75. So this is the average, having a couple years of experience under your belt. And these salaries are done through a survey, and this is what industry is out there. So the picture it's painting is, hey, if we get a certification, it might be some money, it might be a lot of time, it might be some pain on my side. But if you're serious about supply chain, it's definitely going to have some return on investment for yourself. I know it has for Chris and myself in that regard. And then it's got kind of a breakdown about the certifications. This is all a survey, but hey, what certification pays the most? But I'd really try to focus on, don't try to chase the money. Think about, which area of supply chain sounds most interesting. And then with the CPIM, it's a very great one to really get engaged about the APICS body of knowledge. And the basics of supply chain is critical to setting the foundation. So I always recommend to students, CPIM is a good stepping stone, and then the other ones could be in the down the road if you want to continue to pursue these and you had a good experience taking the exam there. So this is an overview of some of the instructors we have. So the company decals this is the industry experience that all the teachers have. So what we really try to do is make sure that we really tie in industry standards and practices, what happens at companies. So the best part of teaching, I really think, is you learn a lot from the students as well, because we always want to think about, how does your company do a certain process? And then how do we, connect on the APICS way of doing that to help us, and then give us the expertise to pass the exam. But what I learned in supply chain is, regardless of the industry, all companies really have the same challenge around that the CPI can help with, regardless of what industry you are. So it's really, for myself, I find that very empowering that I can, figure out really quickly where the pain points are for a company and what are some of the remedies to get towards solutions. But a lot of our instructors have a lot of experience, and our goal is to really make the class very fun, and then build a relationship with the students, because these teachers they're all local, they're all close, and they're active in the community. And then just some pictures on the classes, and some of these schools are UTA, UTD. We did an information session there a couple years back, but it's never too early to start. And the key is, if you really know you want to stay into supply chain, you're definitely gonna have some good ROI as the earlier you can approach this, when it fits in with your everyone's busy schedule. So just some more pictures. We do training at companies as well. So the bottom left there, we did Medtronics, which is a very large medical company. We went there and did CPIM training with a bunch of the department within supply chain there. And then some of the other, company above is a construction company where we did a kind of a boot camp version of CPIM. So these are all DFW classes that we hold. And, there's a lot of smiles in this picture. And I think people feel really proud of making it through the class, enjoying it. And again, it's not easy, but it's all about how do we really stay curious about our field of supply chain. And then also we have if you were to enroll in the class, we want to stay connected with you, through the journey. So we have dinner events and we have social activities. So we really, again, going back to everyone's around DFW, we really want to help stay engaged. And obviously there's some good things that happen from a networking perspective. A lot of the students, they find jobs through other professionals in APICS, and APICS is kind of it helps bring people together. So I really enjoy the community aspect, and you'll get that, after taking the course or during taking the course. And then the best part is we give a free dinner to our students. So if you were to pass CPIM 1, we'd give you a free dinner, and you'd meet some of our professionals at our at our events. We have an 80% first time pass rate, and the door's always open. So in the event that you don't pass the first time, you have a free invitation to our future classes. So you pay for it once, and if something happens where you have some challenges with your work schedule, you can always take the classes for free, and then we'll make sure you pass it. And we've seen that sometimes it's happens, and it's always more exciting when individuals stay with it. So here in 2016, I was interviewed about my friend owns a company in Ann Arbor called Industry Star, which is a supply chain consulting company, and he was saying he wanted to interview, get feedback about certification. So I'm one of many who have certifications, right? There's a tremendous amount of people in the country and the world that have these certifications, and Chris can probably talk to this a little bit too, but these are the takeaways that I had. I said this in 2016, and I still stand by this, that they really shortened the learning curve for myself in supply chain. I kind of jumped around a lot of companies, and I was really able to fix things very quickly through APICS. Outside of the technical knowledge, I think it built a fire in me to kind of try to continuously learn and empower myself to not be afraid to try new things. And the certifications helped me from that perspective. And then, do you recommend companies putting in place certification training programs? So, of course, I always recommend companies if it makes sense with their employment, but going back to in supply chain or any field you go into, if it's going to be in accounting or finance, it's all about putting yourself in the driver's seat, and there's a lot more learning to be had after the college experience. And and then some additional details, then we can open it up for questions. So average first time pass rate, we give free passes to to students. Once you're certified, you'll be recognized. We'll post the information on Collin's college's registration details as well. But here are some actual tutorials that we got from students recently. They enjoyed the class. Definitely glad to participate. So it's a lot of hours. And the one obvious thing I didn't mention is the CPIM. It's 24 hours of training. And right now we plan to deliver that learning on Thursday nights around 6 p.m. And we're going to be in 3-hour blocks. But we're going to be really tailored to whatever the students want. So if we want to do some classes via remote and some via on-site and campus, we'll be able to support that. So we're going to be very flexible with the students in that regard. So hopefully Thursday night is a time that works with your schedule. And then there's a CSCP participation certification we get, but it's always great to get feedback from the students. So we just finished the CSCP class, and at the bottom was a UTD master student. We got some feedback about, hey, this certification's been great. I learned a lot. And it's always really encouraging to get that, because the material could be dry. And I know that supply chain isn't always the most exciting thing to talk through with all the other distractions we have in this world, right? So that was my 32-minute overview. I look forward to any questions. And Chris, do you want to add anything before we jump into questions, Chris?
Vince, you hit a lot of the high points. I think that the overarching benefit for me of my APICS certification has been the professional advancement that it's provided me. Every job that I've had, and I've had a lot of them with big name companies, but every job I've had for the last decade, the application and the job description had APICS certification as a preferred attribute. So I guess when I look at the investment that students have to make for this, you're asking yourself, well, what's in it for me? Why would I do this? And so I can't emphasize enough how it will have immediate impact on your career trajectory by just being able to have those initials behind your name. So without going down the rabbit hole on that, my add-on, Vince, to answer your question, is just, it's never hurt me, and it almost always has helped me with every endeavor I've tried to undertake.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. And one thing it's not uncommon, and I've seen this before at some of the companies I work at, is you're working on a project and you're dusting off the old APICS certification books that you have, because as years go by, you always want to be able to reference the material. but it's very common for companies to really to continue to embrace it. But thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. And I know that, any other thoughts or comments from anyone? We could,
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
So, how much would the course cost to take? I never took a work certificate before at Collin.
Sure. I think John or Karen, would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, they're still working on that in the curriculum office. We should have a summary to send out. Are you registered on Eventbrite so that we have your email address? We can send that out to you if you like.
Yeah, sure. I would like that.
Will do.
Awesome.
So son, let me add a little bit to, your thought process about whether to take APICS or not. I have held several management positions in high-level manufacturing environments, both automotive, oil and gas, aerospace. The last job I had before Boeing, I had a staff of 30 master schedulers and production planners, and so I had a lot of opportunities to interview people. And back to Vince's point, when I was setting up interview questions for all of my prospective employees, I went back to my APICS manuals and I pulled out questions from my APICS manuals to ask potential candidates. So the point I'm trying to make to you is there is a huge ROI on this knowledge that will never ever hurt you and will have lots of opportunities to help you advance your career in the future. So just consider that when you're trying to do the pros and cons of whether you should pursue a certification or not.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it makes me think, thanks for adding that, Chris. So we think about, CPIM is about plan, source, and make. And, companies, they do demand planning, and it's all about statistical forecasts and things like that, and looking at data to come up with what's the right safety stock levels and inventory levels. But it really takes someone to understand the logic behind it. And it's a lot more than statistics, but really how all the puzzles fit together in the equation. And when someone has a CPIM, it definitely goes without saying that they truly understand what is needed for a supply chain to function properly. And I know early in my career, this is before I had the APICS certification, I was managing an MRP work queue, which is basically I was a tactical buyer. And I was all things happen, right? So if inventory gets scrapped or the customer changes, there's all these requisition messages that require you to take action as a buyer to bring product in for the factory or for a product line. And at the time, it was over my head in regards to why things were happening and how I can do my job better. And then after getting the certification, everything fit together and the light bulb went off for myself. And granted, I had a supply chain undergraduate degree at Western Michigan, which is a decent, it's a really good supply chain school. But it's all about CPIM and APICS really dig a lot deeper than the average university is going to do from a supply chain perspective. And that's why these are great things to think about. It's never a bad idea to invest in yourself, but yeah, there is an expense obviously there, but we always should be, investing in ourselves.
I agree.
Yeah, sorry, son, go ahead.
No, I just said I agree.
So what I would like to add to that is Vince is spot on that analogy. I was 45 before I got my CPIM certification. And so I had a pretty decent career. I had 25 years of manufacturing and supply chain experience before I got my CPIM certification. And what it provided me at 45 was that connective tissue to explain why I did all the things I did over those years. I was a manufacturing supervisor. I was a shop floor planner. I was a shop floor logistics manager. I was a purchasing manager. I would all the way up through, I was putting in, I was responsible for long-term PSYOP plans, 5-year plans, planning billions of dollars worth of revenue. And I had never had anybody explain to me how that production order for that one piece of material was being manufactured on the shop floor connected to the 5-year plan for that business. And until I had my certification, I didn't understand that. So Vince, your analogy is spot on. It allows you to connect the dots and speak at a level that's so much higher than those people that don't have all of the relevant details of all the different facets of manufacturing and supply chain.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, I mean, Chris has a Purdue education, so it's definitely a, and I think you're
That's right. Big Ten and Purdue, boiler up.
Yeah, and that's definitely not an easy. It's not an easy school to make, with their engineering side. So, all right. So if there's no more questions, I think
Actually, last question, Vince. You mentioned 24 hours of training over 3 block hours, so it sounds like 8 weeks, right?
Yeah.
If my math works out right. But I suspect that 24 hours of discussion or study is probably not sufficient to really pass the exam. So what sort of time commitment is typically required of candidates who are wanting to pass the exam?
Yeah, really good question. Sorry for not hitting on that. So, it obviously depends a little bit on your background of supply chain. It's all about knowing the APICS way to pass the exam. I would generally say for the CPIM 1, it's going to take, at least 2 months of, a couple hours, maybe a couple hours a week. But so we've, maybe CPIM would probably be around, what would you say, Chris? Maybe about 30 hours. Maybe it'd be definitely over 20, but it wouldn't be too significant. Where it gets really a lot more complicated is the CPIM 2. So what happens is the way the courses are designed is if you read the material beforehand, you'll get a lot more from the content. And then after the class finishes, spending about 2 months to just digest the material and, reviewing the material, maybe an hour every couple of days, and you should be fine. So I got to think better on how to give you a straight answer, but it's hard to really give you how many hours you need. I would think about it like a 3-credit class. So I'm sure if Steve, if you have a college, degree, which I'm assuming you do, it's all about, one class, how much time you put into it, like kind of a master's, maybe a master's level. Chris,
Sure.
Is there anything you want to add? You probably might have a better answer than me.
Well, so yes, I have an opinion on that, and your analogy of a college course is probably accurate. I will tell you, for me, the biggest value add I had was terminology, understanding terminology and logic, because when I took all 5 of, when Vince mentioned earlier, we had 5 certification exams. When I took all 5 of those tests, each one of them had, so in general, the tests are usually multiple choice questions. 4 answers are given to you. And on almost every single question, you could quickly say, well, there's 2 of them that are wrong. And then there's 2 of them that are right, and one of them is more right than the other. So it's really a matter of understanding terminology, definitions, understanding what the question is asking you. Now, my strategy for taking each one of those classes is a little different than what Vince just said, because the way I learn is primarily from the classes themselves. I don't get as much from the book reading as some others do, and I know that about myself. So I would schedule my tests within 2 weeks of the completion of each class that I took, just so I would force myself to go in and make sure I had a grasp of the information, and I would go test. And luckily for me, that worked out quite well. I never failed a test. So I literally just took the classes, scheduled the test, went in and took them. Now, I'm not saying that to tell you that the tests are easy. I've had many friends that are far smarter than me that have failed these tests. So they're not something to blow off. They are serious tests. But I knew the way that I learned. And so I structured my my weeks up to the finish of the class and to the test based on the way I learned. And I made sure I had, like Vince said, a good grasp of the information, a good grasp of the definitions so that I could go into the test. And it was successful for me.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Hey, to add to that, Steve, you know, if you were to enroll in the class at Collin College, you would get the online material, and it, you know, to really gauge yourself for being ready to test for the exam and do well. There's a lot of practice questions, and if you can consistently get around mid to low 70s on the practice questions, you're ready to sit for the exam. So that, you know, the trick about it is, you know, doing that early. You can understand where your pain points are, and then you can really customize your training or your focus accordingly. That's another way that would really help students. So we try to share as much tips as we have to get through the exams, and we want to make the class fun and talk about industry and share ideas about some stories that we learned at companies and projects that relate to this. So
yeah, let me add to that, Vince. You're absolutely right about the material that APICS provides, the practice tests, etc. I went through all of that, and for 2 weeks before I took each exam, I went through those tests religiously until I was passing them on my own. So every time, you know, you'd start and you'd get a really bad score, and every time that I got a really bad score, I looked up every single answer that I got wrong, and I looked up why it was wrong, so that the next time when I took it, I understood that. And I did that over and over and over again until I was passing the practice test, and that's when I went in and took the final test.
sure, that's great. Yeah, and then you know, one thing, what makes APICS's core competency is really the material, the body of knowledge, and there's so many supply chain books out there, and I've looked over a lot of them, you know, textbooks in school, and I really, you know, APICS is definitely a step above on really having high quality material that really helps with the learning. All right, so any last comments or questions? I think we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll stay in touch. Stay in touch with John. On John, anything you want to add? Any closing thoughts? All right, Chris. Any closing thoughts?
No, just thanks everybody for coming, and I would not to speak for Vince, but I would think he or I would always be available if anybody had any additional follow-up questions that they wanted to ask. So feel free to reach out to either one of us.
Yeah, that's great. And we're both on LinkedIn, so that's probably the easiest way.
Yep.
Great. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Enjoy your Thursday night. Karen, have a nice
Thank
night.
you.
Thanks for the
Thank
time,
you.
guys.
You too. Have a good night.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Bye.